Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the Antec C8. Now this is a full tower case. It currently costs less than £100 and it comes in your choice of either black or white. And first impressions looking in from the outside are really good. It looks to be a really solid case, but we will see when we build in detail in it if actually the rest of the case is that good. And I'll be sharing my thoughts on the case at the end of the video. Okay, let's take a look at the other parts I'm going to be building with today. For the motherboard, I'm going to be using the ASRock X670E Taichi Carrara. For the CPU, I'm going to be using AMD's Ryzen 7, it's the 7800 X3D. Keeping our CPU cool, I've got a 360mm AIO from Antec, it's the Symphony 360 ARGB. For RAM, I've got 32GB of Kingston Fury Renegade RGB DDR5 at 7200 megatransfers per second. For storage, I'm going with a single Gen 4 NVMe drive from Samsung. It's their 990 Pro in 2TB capacity. Powering the whole build, I've got a 1050 watt fully modular ATX 3.0 power supply from Thermaltake. It's the Toughpower GF-A3 Snow. For the graphics card, I'm going to be using the Gigabyte Aero RTX 4070 Super. And for case fans, I'm going to be using Antec's Fusion 120mm ARGB fans in white. Okay, that's all the parts. Let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. So it's great to see that the case doesn't have a front pillar. We've just got our two tempered glass panels joining together here, which is going to give us a great unobstructed view of our build when we look into it. To remove the tempered glass panel, there's a little notch at the back you can get your hand into. You can then pop it out from the back and then just lift it up and away. So once you remove the side panel, you're able to get your hand in here. You're going to pull the front panel away from the top and again lift it up and away. Our other side panel is removed in exactly the same way. There's a little notch at the back you can get your hand into, pop it out from the top and then lift up and away. So we take a look at the back of the panel we just removed. You'll notice the whole panel is a mesh panel. There's no additional dust filters behind it, but given that the holes in the mesh are quite fine, I don't think you're going to need one. Taking a look at our front I/O, we've got a power and reset button. We've got two USB Type A, a single Type C port and a combined headphone and microphone jack. To remove our case's top panel, you can simply get your thumb in here and just push it up, and then it's simply going to be able to lift off. Take a look at the back of the panel we've just removed. You'll notice, just like the side panel, there's no additional dust filters. Our case's one and only dust filter is on the bottom, where we've got this large nylon dust filter which can simply be pulled out from the front for cleaning. So there are other cases where you've got the seamless joint and the tempered glass panels at the front that come with removable front pillars. The idea is you keep the pillar in during the build to give the case rigidity, and it's only at the end of the build you take it out, put your two tempered glass panels in to give the case its rigidity back again. So Antec have been really confident here by shipping the case without a pillar at all. So we give the case a little bit of a push, and actually it is completely rock solid. I cannot put any flex at all in this case. So out of all the cases I have checked out that do have this seamless tempered glass panel joint at the front and side, this is by far the most rigid case that I have used. So in terms of fan support, at both the top and the bottom of the case, you can fit up to three 120 or three 140mm fans, or actually up to two 160mm fans. On the side of the case, it's up to three 120 or two 140mm fans, while on the rear of the case, it's up to a single 120 or 140mm fan. In terms of radiator support, at the top, the side and the bottom, it's up to a 360 or 280mm radiator, while on the rear, it's up to 120mm radiator. So out of the box, the case is set up for 140mm fans at the bottom. You can see there's really only one slot here and one slot here, so only 140mm fans are going to fit. If you want to go with 120mm fans, we're going to need to change this bracket out for the 120mm bracket that comes in the case accessory box. So with the bracket removed, you can see the 160mm mounting hole. So if you're going with 160mm fans, you don't need any additional bracket at the bottom. You're going to mount your fans directly to the bottom of the case. So because I'm going with 120mm fans, I'm going to set the 120mm fan bracket into place, and I can secure it with the four screws we've just removed. So I do think this is an absolutely brilliant idea, because no matter what size of fans you go with, they are going to fit absolutely perfect, and you're not going to have any additional slots showing. So this is really going to clean up the bottom of the case. So being a full tower case, as you'd expect, it does accommodate motherboards up to E8X in size, and if you want to go with a CPU cooler, the maximum height supported is 175mm. Taking a look at the rear of the case, we've got 8 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets, and again, you're not going to have to worry about graphics card compatibility in this case, with a maximum length of 440mm being supported. One more thing you're not going to have to worry about is unsightly cables showing in the back of the case, because we've got rubber grommets and all the cutouts around the motherboard. Moving into our case's second compartment, and the first thing I'm noticing is this air duct partition, which is separating the second compartment into two. And I think the thinking behind this is it's going to try and improve the path of the airflow with the side fans or radiators. If you did want to remove it, there's 2 screws at the back and 3 screws at the front. And then you're going to be able to simply lift this away. But this to me seems like a good idea, so I'm definitely going to be leaving it in. And you don't have to worry about passing your cables through. There's a gap at the top and a gap at the bottom where you're still going to be able to pass cables through. So in terms of cable routing, you've got absolutely loads of space here for your cables, and we've got these Velcro straps pre-installed to help manage the cables in this central area. And again, there's additional Velcro straps at the top. We've got plenty of other cable tie-down points, and in the case accessory box, we get more Velcro cable straps and cable ties. So in terms of our case cables, absolutely brilliant to see that Antec have colour matched them. So we've got our USB 3.0 cable, front panel Type-C. We've got our front panel cable, and great to see that Antec can combine these into a single cable, even though they're not occupying all the slots on it. And we've got our HD audio cable. Your power supply is going to sit in this little shelf. There's a rubber pad here, and you're simply going to slide your power supply into here. And the case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 210mm. Below the power supply, we've got a hard drive cage. It's held on at the back with 2 screws. And then when the screws removed, we can simply pull the hard drive cage forward to remove it. So in the hard drive cage, you're going to be able to fit up to 2 3.5-inch drives. You're simply going to slot them in from the front. And then all you're going to do is use the large screws from the case accessory box to screw it in from the side. We've got a dedicated 2.5-inch drive mounting bracket at the bottom held on with a thumb screw. And once it's been loosened, we're going to be able to pull the bracket forward and lift it out. And we've got an identical bracket at the top of the case and pull the bracket forward to remove it. So in each of these brackets, you're going to be able to mount 2 2.5-inch drives. So you're just going to simply slot them into place. And then it's just a simple matter of using these little screws with a little lip around the outside to secure the drive in from the side. And if we take a look at the rear of the case, you can see we've got some cable tie-down points to manage the cables coming from our motherboard and our power supply. And Antec include this really nice case accessory box where you're going to be able to individually manage all your screws. We're now ready to start working on our motherboard, and we're going to be installing our CPU, the bracket for our CPU cooler, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open our socket cover, we're going to push this lever down and out, bring it all the way to the centre of the motherboard, and then we can open the socket cover up. We can then lower our CPU down into the socket, making sure we're holding it by the edges and we've got the text the correct way up. Once we're happy it's in the socket, we can close our cover down again. And then if we close the lever, the black bit of plastic will pop off, and we'll put it in our motherboard box for safekeeping. To install the mounting brackets for our CPU cooler, we're going to need to remove the stock clips. They're each held on with 2 screws. Then we need to screw one of the AMD standoffs that comes with our CPU cooler into each corner, and it is the shorter, thicker end that goes into the motherboard. We're going to be installing our M.2 SSD in the top socket, so we need to remove the heatsink, which is held on with 2 screws. We can then insert our drive into the socket, and we'll flatten it down and secure it with a screw from the motherboard box. If you're using the motherboard from new, there'll be some plastic protection on the back of the heatsink you're going to need to remove, and then we can replace our heatsink. We're going to be installing our RAM in the 2nd and 4th slot along from the CPU, so we can open the clips in these slots. And then all we need to do is line the RAM up with the slots, and once we're happy it's lined up, some firm pressure, and it's going to clip into place. Next, we can insert our motherboard into the case, line it up with the standoffs at the back. So you'll notice our middle standoff is elongated, and once it goes through the motherboard, it's going to help hold it in place. And then we can secure the motherboard to the case using 9 of the screws with a little lip around the outside. Next, we've got our case cables to get plugged in. Our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left-hand side of the motherboard. So we can bring our cable through the cutout, line it up with the header, and we're going to have to plug it in with the HD audio text facing down the way. Our front panel connectors are going to go into this header down the bottom right hand side of the motherboard, so we can bring our cable through the cutout, and we're going to need to plug it in with the front panel text facing up the way. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. Our USB 3.0 cable is going to go into this header here, so we'll bring it in through the cutout, line it up with the header, and push it into place. Our front panel Type-C cable is going to go into the header below, so we'll bring it through the cutout, line it up, and push into place. And again, we'll just pull all our excess cable through to the back. We're ready to install our power supply. I've gone ahead and plugged in the cables we're going to need. So I plugged in a 12-volt high power cable to power our graphics card, 2 8-pin EPS cables to add additional power to our CPU, our 24-pin motherboard cable, and a SATA power cable. The reason I plug SATA power in is that both our AIO and our fan hubs that we're going to use are going to need SATA power. We can then set our power supply into place at the back, and importantly we're going to want to make sure we have our power supply's intake fan facing out the way. We can then secure our power supply into place before the power supply screws from the case accessory box. Our two 8-pin EPS cables are going to go into these headers at the top left of the motherboard, so we can bring our cables through the cutout, line them up with the headers and push into place. And then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the back. Our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here. So we'll bring our cable through the cutout, line it up with the header and push into place. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. So it's great to see that our AIO comes with the fans pre-installed. I am going to be changing the fans out. Antec have sent me absolutely loads of their new Fusion fans, and I want all the case fans and the fans in the AIO to match, so I'm going to go ahead and remove these fans. We can then set our new fans onto the radiator, and we'll secure them into place with the original screws. So coming from each of our fans, we've got two cables. We've got a 3-pin 5V ARGB cable, and we're going to plug this into the fan hub that comes with our 5-pack of fans. The other cable that comes with our fans is a 4-pin PWM cable. Now we could plug this into our fan hub as well, but I would like to have independent control of our CPU and case fans. So the original case fans that were on the AIO came with a triple splitter cable. So all I'm going to do is plug each of our fans into the triple PWM splitter cable. So that's just going to leave us one 4-pin PWM cable, which we're going to plug into our CPU fan header. If we take a look at our pump, we've got one long cable coming from it with multiple connectors on it. We've got a 3-pin fan cable that's going to go into our pump header, and it's going to allow our motherboard to control the speed of our pump. We've got a SATA power cable, and we're going to plug a SATA cable coming from our power supply into here to power the pump. And then we've got a 3-pin 5V ARGB cable, and we can plug this into an ARGB header on our motherboard, which is going to allow us to control the lighting effects on the pump. Next we need to install the AMD brackets to our pump. So we can slot the bracket into here, and then we'll secure it into place with the small screws that come with the AIO. And then it's just the same thing on the other end. We can then set our AIO into place at the top of the case, and we'll get it screwed into place using the short radiator screws. Next I'm just going to pass all the fan cables through to the back of the case. Our CPU fan header is this one here at the top of the motherboard, so I'm going to bring the triple PWM cable back through. We'll get it lined up with a header and push into place. And we'll plug these RGB cables into our fan hub whenever we install our case fans. Next we're going to add some thermal paste to the centre of the CPU. We're going to need to remove the plastic protection from our AIO's cold plate, and then I like to just wrap the cables up round the pump bracket where they're going to keep them organised. So we can then line our pump up with a bracket on the motherboard, and we're going to want to get a thumb screw onto each corner. I'm then just going to pass the cables coming from our pump through to the back. So I really don't like the look of this white cable sitting here. I think it definitely would look better if we were to route it under this bracket as well, and then it would just be one straight white cable running up the motherboard rather than seeing this one too. So I'm just going to take the pump off, reapply the thermal paste, and we'll reinstall it with the cable under the bracket. Okay, so there we go, that's it reinstalled with the cable around both of these brackets at the top, and you can see the cable is free, it's not getting caught on the cold plate, it's just the brackets that are helping to organise it, and I think definitely the white cable would work better with an all white motherboard. So we can remove the plastic protection from our AIO. So our pump header is this one at the top of the motherboard, just to the right our CPU fan header. So we'll bring the 3-pin cable back through, line it up with the header, and push into place. And we've got an ARGB header just here, so we'll bring the ARGB cable coming from our pump through, line it up with a header, and push into place. And then at the back of the case, we can plug the SATA cable coming from our pump into the SATA cable coming from our power supply. Next, we can set 3 case fans into place on the bottom of the case set to intake. And as we set them in, we're just going to pass the cables through to the back, and then we can screw the fans into place from underneath. And we can then replace the bottom dust filter. We can set 3 fans into place at the side, again set to intake. And then at the rear of the case we can set a 120mm fan in as exhaust. The next thing to do is get our fans connected up to the hub. So each 5-pack of fans comes with a hub. I've installed 10 of the fans in the case, so I'm going to use 2 hubs. So on the top we have got 5 PWM connectors, so the PWM connectors for our fans are going to go into here. On the bottom of the case, we have got 5 3-pin 5V ARGB connectors. We just need to plug the ARGB connectors into here. On one side of the hub, we've got a SATA power connector, so it's a SATA power cable from our power supply to power the hub. And then on the other side of the hub, we've got 2 different connectors. This one here is where you can plug your reset button from your case into. It's 2 pins, and then if you replace your reset button, it's going to cycle through the ARGB effects on the hub. The second cable is going to go into here. Coming from the other end of this cable, we've got 2 different headers on it. We've got a 4-pin PWM cable and a 3-pin 5V ARGB cable. So we plug both these into our motherboard. It's going to allow the motherboard to control the speed of the fans, but also the ARGB lighting effects on the fans. Alternatively, you can actually control the lighting effects from the hub itself. We've got 2 different buttons. This one is the LED speed, so you'll press it to control the speed of the LED effects coming from the built-in hub. And this one is the mode, so press it to cycle through the modes on the controller. Okay, so it's just a matter of getting our fans plugged into the controller. Remember, for the fans on the radiator, I've already plugged the PWM cables into our CPU fan header, so it's just the ARGB cables that we're going to be plugging into the controller. Okay, that's all our fans connected up to the controllers. Next thing to do is plug a SATA cable in to power them. And then all we need to do is pass the PWM and ARGB cable coming from each of the controllers through and get them plugged into the motherboard. So we do have a system fan header down at the bottom of the motherboard, so we'll plug the PWM cable from our bottom fan hub into it, and 2 headers to the right we've got another ARGB cable. Again, at the top of the motherboard we've got a system fan header, so we'll plug the PWM cable from our top fan hub into here, and we've got another ARGB header just below. And then again we'll just pull all our excess cable through to the back. We're now ready to install our graphics card, and I fancy installing it vertically in the case, so we just need to remove the bottom 6 expansion slot brackets. Antec do have a vertical GPU bracket. I don't have it, so I'm going to be using this one from Lee. So most of the time it's easier to actually install your graphics card to the bracket outside the case and then set the whole thing in one go. So I'm just going to open the clip on the bracket, and then we can take our GPU and line it up with the bracket. And once we have everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure and it's going to clip into place. And you can see here we've got a 4-slot bracket, so I could have installed the graphics card either further towards the front or further toward the back, but I've just gone for the middle position. And then we'll secure it into place with 2 of the power supply screws from the case accessory box. Next I'm going to open the clip in the top PCIe slot on the motherboard. Then I'm just going to set our GPU support bracket into place. We'll line the riser cable up with our motherboard and then push into place. I'm just going to tuck the riser cable down the way, and then we can just line our GPU support bracket up with the back of the case, and we'll secure it into place again with the thumb screws. And then we can bring our 12V high power cable through, we'll line it up with the graphics card and push into place. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. Okay, last thing to do is some cable management to get the panels back on again. Okay, so that's the build complete and looking amazing. As you can see, I've gone ahead and set the PC up. If you don't know how to do that, I've made another video covering everything, including Windows installation, entering the BIOS, updating the BIOS, adjusting all the BIOS settings, and setting up your RGB. And I'll put a link to that video in the description. What I want to do now is take a look at the temperatures. So our 7800X3D idled at 40 degrees and reached a maximum of 78 degrees during a 10-minute IDA64 stability test. Our RTX 4070 Super idled at 28 degrees and reached a maximum of 60 degrees during the stability test. We had an average noise levels of 33 decibels at idle and 53 decibels under load. So as you'd expect with a 360mm AIO and 10 fans in the case, the temperatures were excellent. Noise levels were also pretty good at idle with the fans running on the silent fan profile. Under load they did kick up a little bit and they would need a little bit of tuning, but given the temperatures were so good in this case, there's plenty of room to limit that and keep the noise levels under load down as well. One thing I did notice during the AIDA64 stability test, putting a hand on the meshed side panel, the area towards the front was lovely and cool, and when you came to the edge of the air duct partition, the temperature increased again, so it did look like this was doing a good job of focusing lots of cool air into the case. So in terms of building on the case, this was really straightforward. It's a large case, it's well thought out, and you shouldn't have any difficulties even if you are a first-time builder. There would be two things that I would change if I was building a game, but that was really just with component choice. The first is the fans that I used in the case. I do think these are really good looking fans on the front of them, but the back of the fan do not look good at all, particularly on the side of the case. And what I would much rather do is use some reverse fans, so you would have the good side of the fans on display. And I would really love Antec to make some reverse versions of these fans, because the fans actually, as I've said, run lovely and quiet at idle, and the front of them looks really good. The only other thing I didn't like was the large white cable running over the black bit of the motherboard, and I think this would go much better with an all-white motherboard. So moving on to the things that I liked about the case, and I can sum this up in two things. The first is the price, and the second is the build quality. Price of this case is absolutely brilliant. It's unbelievable that Antec have put a case out that's this good for under £100, and the build quality in this case is absolutely flawless. Nice thick tempered glass panels, easy mechanisms for taking all the panels on and off completely toollessly. Lots of drive support, lots of fan and radiator support, rubber grommets, Velcro cable straps, all your case cables colour matched to the case, and again a really nice case accessory box with all your screws individually organised, and they've even thought to include the standoff insertion and removal tool. So moving on to things I don't like about the case, and given this case's price, I'm absolutely stumped here. Antec have absolutely nailed it. I do think it is important to maybe compare this to some of the O11 cases, and with those cases you're paying a little bit more, but you are getting some additional features. Those cases you are going to be able to invert and maybe have them on the other side of your desk. You are going to have removable fan and radiator brackets, and in terms of cable management, I do think it is a little bit better at the back compared to this case. You're also going to have more options for mounting your graphics card in the upright position in the O11 cases. But given this case's budget price of less than £100, the absolutely perfect build quality, this is the perfect package that Antec have put together. And a lot of those other features, if you want them, of course you'll buy the O11 Dynamic Evo to get them. But if you're just looking for a really solid build that looks good, has a great build quality, and isn't going to break the bank, this case has absolutely got it, and I can 100% recommend it. So if you have enjoyed this full step-by-step PC build guide, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.